The emergency sirens wailed across Zenthar Prime, the capital world of the Galactic Coalition. In the Grand Assembly Hall, representatives from 300 species gathered in chaos. Screens displayed the same horrifying images, dark shapes moving through the void of space, billions of them, each one massive and hungry. The void swarm had returned. Elder Krith of the Chromath stood at the central podium, his forearms trembling. His species had lived for 50,000 years, and he was old even by their standards. He remembered the stories passed down through 200 generations. Stories of the last time the swarm came 10,000 years ago, when they consumed entire star systems and left nothing but silence. "They are 3 months away from the outer rim," Krith announced, his voice breaking. "Every simulation shows the same result. We cannot stop them. We can only retreat." The hall erupted in panic. Species argued and shouted. Some demanded immediate evacuation. Others called for a final stand. The Velusian ambassador, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline form, flickered with distress. The Thane representatives, massive warriors who stood 3 meters tall, roared their defiance even as their tactical officers calculated impossible odds. Ambassador Chen Wei of Earth sat quietly in the human section. She was a small woman, barely 60 years old, with gray hair tied back simply. Compared to the ancient beings around her, she looked like a child. Humans had only joined the coalition 847 years ago. They were considered young, inexperienced, and unremarkable in most ways. Chen watched the chaos and remembered her history lessons. Every human child learned about First Contact Day, how humanity had been killing itself in tribal wars when the solar flare came. Scientists detected it too late, a massive coronal ejection that would have sterilized Earth completely. Humanity had no technology to stop it. They had nothing but prayers and fear. Then the Chromath came. They had been exploring that sector of space, studying primitive worlds. They saw Earth's crisis and made a choice. Using ancient technology that they barely understood anymore, technology left by even older species, they diverted the flare. The energy required nearly destroyed their ship. 15,000 Chromath died that day, including Krith's own grandfather. They saved 6 billion humans they had never met. The Chromath never asked for payment. When humanity developed faster than light travel centuries later and sought them out, the Chromath simply welcomed them as friends. They helped humanity join the coalition. They shared knowledge freely. When humans asked how to repay the debt, Elder Krith's predecessor had said, "Live well. Be kind, that is payment enough." Now the Chromath were dying. Their birth rate had collapsed millennia ago. They had only 3 worlds left, barely 12 million individuals. The weight of their species' long history pressed down on them like gravity. "We must evacuate the outer rim," a Thane general declared, pulling Chen from her memories. "Pull back to the core worlds, fortify, survive." "Abandon 47 systems?" a Velusian protested. "Trillions of civilians? Better some survive than all perish," the Thane replied grimly. "The Viridian line must be held," Elder Krith said, his voice weak. "It is the gateway to the inner galaxy. If the swarm takes it, they can sweep through the core worlds one by one. But I see no way to hold it. Every species will need their full military strength to protect their own worlds." Silence fell across the hall. Everyone understood what that meant. The Viridian line would fall. The outer rim would be consumed, and then the swarm would come for the rest. Chen stood up. Her chair scraping echoed in the quiet hall. "Humanity will hold the Viridian line," she said simply. Thousands of eyes turned to her. Confusion rippled through the assembly. The Thane general's translator took several seconds to process her words, as if checking for errors. "Ambassador Chen," Elder Krith said gently, "humanity has 43 colony worlds. Your military, while brave numbers only. We will hold the line," Chen repeated. "Every ship, every station, every human soldier we have." "That would leave Earth defenseless," a Velusian observer said, shocked. "You would abandon your homeworld's protection?" "The Chromath saved Earth when we were helpless," Chen said. Her voice was calm but carried through the hall. "We were strangers to them. They asked nothing in return. For 847 years, we have built our civilization on the foundation of their sacrifice. We have not forgotten. Elder Krith's face, weathered by millennia, contorted with emotion. "Child species, you owe us nothing. That debt was paid in friendship long ago. Do not throw away your future for—" "This is not about debt anymore," Chen interrupted softly. "This is about who we choose to be. The Chromath taught us that some things matter more than survival. They proved it when they saved us. Now we prove that we learned the lesson." She looked around the hall at the gathered species. "Humanity will hold the Viridian line. We will not ask for your help. We will not demand reinforcements. This is our choice. But we need 3 weeks to position our fleet. We ask only that you use that time to evacuate as many civilians from the Outer Rim as possible." "You cannot win," the Thane general said, not with mockery but with pity. "Even if you commit everything, humanity's full military strength is perhaps 5,000 capital ships. The swarm has billions." Chen smiled then, and it was not a happy expression. It was the smile of someone who had already made peace with death. "We are not trying to win, General. We are trying to give everyone else a chance to live. That is what the Chromath taught us. Some things are worth dying for." She bowed to Elder Krith and walked out of the assembly hall. The silence she left behind was absolute. Species that had existed for millions of years, that had fought countless wars and survived endless challenges, suddenly found themselves confronted with something they did not understand. A young race, barely a footnote in galactic history, had just volunteered for extinction to save everyone else. Elder Krith collapsed into his seat, his forearms covering his face. He wept then for the first time in 3,000 years, not from grief but from the crushing weight of understanding what humanity was about to do. "They remember," he whispered. "After all these centuries, they remember." 3 weeks passed like a countdown to doomsday. The Viridian Line, a cluster of 47 star systems forming a natural bottleneck between the Outer Rim and the inner galaxy, buzzed with activity that quickly faded to silence. The Thane evacuated their mining colonies. The Velusians pulled back their science stations. Every major species stripped the sector of civilians, military assets, and anything valuable. Within 18 days, the Viridian Line was empty. Ghost stations drifted in orbit around abandoned worlds. Trade routes that had hummed with traffic for millennia went dark. Long-range sensors showed the approaching horror. The Void Swarm, a living wave of organic ships, each one grown rather than built, each one hungry. The Coalition Navy established observation posts just beyond the Viridian Line, safely distant but close enough to monitor what came next. Every species wanted to witness what humanity would do. Some came to honor the sacrifice. Others came because they could not believe it would actually happen. Surely humanity would see reason at the last moment and retreat. On the bridge of the observation ship Celestial Watch, Captain Vorn of the Thane watched his sensor screens with growing confusion. "They actually came," he muttered to his second officer. "I thought it was pride talking. Political theater." But they actually came. The human fleet materialized in the Viridian Line like stars being born. Jump signatures lit up the darkness as ship after ship arrived. Carriers, battleships, destroyers, cruisers, supply vessels, hospital ships, and construction platforms. Everything humanity possessed that could fly and fight. Admiral Sarah Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the Earth flagship Indomitable, watching the fleet assemble around her. She was a tall woman with dark skin and gray hair cut military short. Her uniform was simple, practical, without the decorations favored by other species officers. Behind her, 300 crew members worked at their stations with calm efficiency. "Fleet status," she ordered. 5,217. "Capital ships reporting ready," her tactical officer replied. An additional 12,000 support craft, 300,000 Marines across the fleet. Total personnel, 8.4 million. Defense platform construction? Proceeding on schedule, Admiral. We will have orbital fortifications around all major choke points within 48 hours. Okonkwo nodded. 8.4 million souls. Every single one a volunteer. Every single one who could have stayed home, safe on Earth or one of the colony worlds. Instead, they were here about to face an enemy that had destroyed civilizations older than human recorded history. Her communications officer looked up. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from Elder Krith." "Put it through." The holographic display showed the Chromath Elder, looking older than ever. His forearms gestured in a pattern that human xenologists had learned meant deep distress. "Admiral Okonkwo," Krith said, "I beg you. This is madness. You have repaid any debt 1,000 times over in friendship. In 8 centuries of knowing your species, you have shown us nothing but kindness. Flee. Do not throw away your species for us. We are old. We are ready to pass into history. But humanity is young. You have so much future ahead of you. Okonkwo smiled gently. Elder Krith, with respect, you do not understand humanity very well yet. Debt is not friendship. Debt is obligation. Friendship is what comes after, when the obligation is fulfilled and you choose to stay anyway. She paused, making sure her next words were clear. This is the debt. The friendship? That comes later. We will share drinks and tell stories when this is done. We will laugh about the time the young species had to teach the old ones about stubbornness. Krith's translator struggled with her tone. Was it humor? Was it certainty? How could she joke about her own extinction? You cannot win this battle, Krith said desperately. Probably not, Okonkwo agreed. But winning is not the only thing that matters, Elder. Humanity learned something from you all those centuries ago. You proved that sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do. You saved us when saving us cost you terribly. Now it is our turn. She cut the transmission before Krith could respond and opened a channel to the entire Coalition observation fleet. Every species monitoring the situation would hear this. This is Admiral Sarah Okonkwo of Earth, commanding the human fleet in the Viridian Line. To all species watching, know this. Today, the galaxy learns what humanity has been building for 847 years. Not just ships. Not just weapons. We have been building a civilization based on a single principle. We remember kindness, and we repay it. Her tactical officer interrupted. Admiral, sensor contact. The swarm vanguard is entering the outer system. All ships to battle stations. Activate defense platforms, launch fighter screens. Across the Viridian Line, the human fleet came alive. Weapons powered up. Shields activated. Thousands of small fighter craft poured from carrier bays like angry insects. On the Celestial Watch, Captain Vorn watched the sensor data with growing horror. By the ancestors, he breathed. It is bigger than projected. 3 times bigger. The void swarm filled the viewing screens. Billions of organic ships, each one a living thing bred for war. They moved like a flock of birds, coordinated by some hive intelligence that nobody understood. They were shaped like twisted bones, covered in carapace armor that could shrug off most weapons. They fed on energy and matter, consuming everything in their path. A Velusian observer transmitted from another ship. The humans must see it by now. Surely they will retreat. This is not bravery. This is suicide. But the human fleet did not retreat. Instead, they moved forward, positioning themselves in defensive formations across the key jump points. Smaller ships took point positions, destroyers and cruisers that would be the first to make contact. The big carriers and battleships formed a second line. Behind them, the defense platforms hummed with power. Admiral Okonkwo opened a fleet-wide channel. All ships, this is the Admiral. You know why we are here. Every one of you volunteered for this. Every one of you understood the odds. The Chromath saved our ancestors when we were helpless. They asked nothing in return. They taught us what it means to be truly civilized. Her voice grew harder. Today we pay that debt. Today we show the galaxy what humans are made of. We hold this line. We do not retreat. We do not surrender. And if we die here, we die knowing that every civilian evacuated from the outer rim, every child saved, every family reunited, that is because we stood in this spot and said no further. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was gentle. I am proud to serve with each of you. I am honored to call you shipmates. Whatever happens in the next hours or days, know that humanity will remember your names forever. Your families will know that you died protecting others. Earth will know that her children grew up and became exactly what the Chromath believed we could be. All ships, weapons free. Show them what humans do when someone threatens our friends. The swarm crashed into the human defensive line like a tsunami hitting a seawall. The battle began with a flash of weapons fire that lit up the darkness of space. Energy beams, missiles, railgun slugs, and plasma torpedoes filled the void. Swarm ships died by the hundreds, but hundreds more pushed through. On the observation ships, the gathered species of the Coalition watched in stunned silence. They had expected a quick slaughter. Instead, they saw something that would change the galaxy forever. They saw humans fight. The battle had raged for 36 hours without pause. On the observation ship Celestial Watch, Captain Vorn of the Thane had not slept. He could not look away from the screens. What he witnessed defied everything he knew about warfare. "This is wrong," his tactical officer said for the 10th time. "They fight wrong. It makes no sense." Vorn understood what she meant. Every species in the coalition had military doctrine developed over millions of years. The principles were universal. Preserve your forces, maintain supply lines, withdraw when losses exceeded acceptable parameters, and never waste ships unnecessarily. War was mathematics. You calculated acceptable losses, measured strategic value, and made rational decisions. Humans ignored all of it. A human destroyer, the Defiant, took heavy damage from swarm bioships. Its shields collapsed. Hull breaches vented atmosphere. Any other species would have withdrawn the ship for repairs. Instead, the Defiant accelerated toward the thickest concentration of swarm vessels. Its captain opened a channel that the observation ships intercepted. "This is Captain Rodriguez to all ships. Our reactor is critical. We cannot save the Defiant, but we can make it count. For Earth, for the Chromath, for everyone we are protecting." The Defiant slammed into the swarm formation at full speed and detonated its reactor. The explosion consumed the destroyer and 17 swarm bioships around it. 200 human crew members died in an instant. They had chosen to. "Madness," Vorn's tactical officer whispered. "They destroyed their own ship, but it happened again. And again." Damaged human vessels did not retreat. They became weapons. Captains calculated not how to save their ships, but how to take the most enemies with them when they fell. On the Indomitable, Admiral Okonkwo watched the tactical display with a face carved from stone. Each red icon that winked out represented a ship and hundreds of lives. She felt each loss like a knife in her heart. But she did not order retreats. She knew her crews. They had volunteered for this. They understood. "Admiral," her communications officer called out, "the Remembrance has lost all weapons systems. Captain Kim is requesting permission to—" "Granted," Okonkwo said before the officer finished. She knew what Captain Kim wanted. The destroyer Remembrance, weapons dead and engines damaged, turned toward the swarm line. It accelerated on emergency power, hull groaning from the stress. Captain Kim's final transmission was simple. "We remember." The Remembrance punched through 17 swarm bioships before its hull disintegrated from the impacts. The wreckage scattered across space, but the gap it created allowed 3 human battleships to pour fire into the swarms. Coordination nodes. Vorn watched this happen and felt something he had not experienced in his 200 years of life. He felt ashamed. His species, the mighty Thane, warriors who prided themselves on courage, had retreated from this battle. These humans, these young ones that the galaxy considered unremarkable, were dying by the thousands to protect everyone else. "Sir," his sensor operator said, "I am detecting something strange in the swarm's formation." "Their coordination is becoming erratic," Vorn leaned forward. "Explain." "The swarm operates as a hive mind, yes? They move in perfect coordination because they share information instantly. But look here." The operator highlighted sections of the battle. Where human ships have exploded in their formations, the swarm vessels are hesitating, making mistakes. They are not used to this. On the Indomitable, Okonkwo's science officer had noticed the same thing. "Admiral, I think we are disrupting their hive coordination. The swarm has never encountered a species that fights harder when losing. They expect damaged ships to retreat when we do the opposite. Their tactical algorithms cannot adapt fast enough." Okonkwo felt a cold smile cross her face. "So our spite is actually a weapon?" "Yes, Admiral. A psychological one. The swarm expects rational behavior. We are being beautifully irrational." "All ships," Okonkwo transmitted. "New priority. Damaged vessels with critical systems, do not just ram them. Detonate your cores in the thickest formations. We are not just killing swarm ships. We are confusing their hive mind. Make every death count double." The human fleet adapted instantly. It was a doctrine born of desperation, but it worked. Ships that would have died anyway became strategic weapons. The swarm, which had steamrolled through defenses for 10,000 years, suddenly faced an enemy that became more dangerous when wounded. Captain Vorn watched a human marine transport take a hit that killed its engines. Instead of drifting helplessly, the transport launched every single marine pod directly at swarm bioships. 3,000 human marines in boarding pods with no hope of extraction, no hope of survival. They crashed into the swarm vessels and began sabotaging them from inside. The communications officer picked up transmissions from the Marines. They were singing. Even as they fought and died in the toxic alien environment of swarm bioships, they sang an old human song called The Parting Glass. The translations were rough, but the meaning was clear. It was a song about saying goodbye. One Marine's transmission came through clearly before it cut off. The Chromath saved our children. Every human here is someone's child grown up. We remember. We always remember. Bourne stood up from his command chair. He could not sit anymore. Around him, his crew worked in silence, but he saw tears on their faces. Thane did not cry often. They were warriors, but they cried now, watching a species they had dismissed as young and weak teach them what true courage meant. The battle continued. 36 hours became 40, then 44. The human fleet paid a terrible price. 30% of their ships were gone. Over 2 million humans had died, but the swarm had lost 40% of its vanguard. Then, something happened that had not occurred in the 10,000 years since the last swarm invasion. The swarm stopped, advancing on every observation ship. Sensor operators stared at their screens in disbelief. The swarm had paused. The hive mind was recalculating. For the first time in recorded history, the Void Swarm had encountered an enemy that made it hesitate. Admiral Okonkwo stood on her bridge, exhausted, covered in the sweat and grime of 40 hours without rest. Around her, her crew looked like ghosts. But they had held. Against impossible odds, with tactics that made no sense, humanity had held the line. "Status report," she ordered, her voice hoarse. "Fleet strength at 70%. Ammunition reserves at 40%. Casualties." The officer's voice broke. 2.1 million dead, 800,000 wounded. Okonkwo closed her eyes briefly. 2 million souls. 2 million families that would receive the worst news possible. 2 million empty chairs at dinner tables across human space. But behind the human fleet, the evacuation routes remained open. Civilian ships from every coalition species were fleeing the outer rim safely. The Viridian line held. A transmission came through from Elder Krith. When it appeared on the screen, the old Chromath was weeping openly, all 4 arms covering his face. "We did not know," Krith said through his tears. "We saved your species 8 centuries ago, but we did not know what we were saving. We did not understand what humanity would become. You are not repaying a debt. You are teaching us what that debt meant, what true compassion looks like when it grows up." Okonkwo wanted to respond, but alarms cut through the bridge. Her tactical officer went pale. "Admiral, new sensor contacts. Multiple jump signatures emerging from dark space. The swarm reinforcements?" Okonkwo asked, already knowing the answer. "Yes, Admiral. And it is bigger. Twice the size of the first fleet." The bridge went silent. They had fought for 40 hours and barely survived. Now an even larger swarm fleet was arriving, and the human fleet was depleted, damaged, and exhausted. Okonkwo looked at her crew. She saw fear in their eyes, but she also saw determination. They had come here knowing death was likely. They had made peace with it. "All ship," she transmitted, "prepare for—" Her communications officer interrupted. "Admiral, wait. I am receiving thousands of jump signatures. But they are not swarm, they are coalition ships." The jump signatures lit up the darkness like stars being born, hundreds at first, then thousands. Ships appeared in perfect formation, surrounding the battered human fleet like a protective shell. Thane battlecruisers, massive and bristling with weapons. Felucian science vessels that had been converted to warships. Dozens of species that humanity had barely heard of, each one bringing every military asset they possessed. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Okonkwo stared at the tactical display in disbelief. Her communications officer was crying openly, trying to manage the flood of incoming transmissions. "Admiral, I have the Thane War Fleet Commander requesting coordinates. The Velusian Armada is asking for tactical updates. There are 47 species here, Admiral. 47 different fleets, all asking how they can help." Okonkwo's hands shook. She gripped the edge of her command chair to steady herself. Behind her, her crew had stopped working, staring at the screen showing thousands of coalition ships taking positions alongside humanity's battered fleet. A priority transmission cut through the others. Elder Krith appeared on the main display, but he was not on his homeworld anymore. He was on the bridge of a Chromath warship wearing battle armor that looked ancient. "Admiral Okonkwo," Krith said, and his voice was strong now, Not weak with age, but burning with purpose. You paid your debt. You stood when no one else would. You fought when victory was impossible. Now we pay ours. Not for debt. For friendship. For tomorrow, another channel opened. General Thok of the Thane, his massive frame filling the screen. Human Admiral, the Thane Collective has not fought a full war in 3,000 years. We became soft. We forgot what honor truly means. Your species reminded us. We stand with you. More transmissions flooded in. A Velusian fleet master, her crystalline form pulsing with light. We are artists and philosophers. We thought we had evolved beyond violence, but we watched human medics drag themselves across battlefields to save our pilots. We watched your species bleed for ours. We will not hide while you stand alone. Species after species declared themselves. The Xinthians, insectoid beings who had never liked humans, arrived with 300 ships. Their hive queen transmitted simply, "Humanity traded fairly with us when others cheated. Small kindness. Big memory. We fight." On his observation ship, Captain Vorn of the Thane had already made his decision hours ago. The moment the second swarm fleet was detected, he had transmitted to his homeworld. "Send the war fleets. Send everything. I will not watch this species die alone." His crew had cheered when the response came through. The Thane war clans, warrior societies that existed only in ceremony and tradition for millennia, had mobilized completely. Every Thane capable of fighting had volunteered. They came now, ships that had not seen combat in living memory, warriors who had trained for a war they never expected to fight. Vorn's second officer looked at him with pride. "Captain, we should join the formation." "Agreed," Vorn said. "Move the Celestial Watch to the human line. We are no longer observers." The transformation spread across the galaxy in real time. News of humanity's stand had reached every coalition world through the observation ship's broadcasts. Citizens of hundreds of species watched as humans died by the thousands to protect everyone else. They watched tactics that made no sense but somehow worked. They watched a young species prove that some things mattered more than survival. On the Velusian homeworld, a world that had not known violence for 5,000 years, civilians gathered in massive public squares to watch the broadcasts. When they saw a human medic with both legs gone, dragging herself across a shattered deck to reach a wounded Velusian pilot from an observation ship, the entire planet seemed to shudder with collective shame. The Velusian Council convened an emergency session. "We are pacifists," one elder argued. "We have evolved beyond war, and yet war has come anyway," another replied. "These humans fight not for territory or resources. They fight so others can live. If we are truly evolved, if we are truly civilized, can we do less?" The vote was unanimous. The Velusian Defense Fleet, which existed only for asteroid management and rescue operations, was mobilized for war. Scientists and artists volunteered to crew weapons they had never trained on. They learned quickly, driven by the knowledge that humans were dying to protect them. The pattern repeated across dozens of worlds. Species that humanity had helped in small ways over 8 centuries suddenly remembered every kindness. A Xinthian hive remembered when human traders had warned them about a contaminated shipment, saving thousands of their young. A small aquatic species recalled how human engineers had fixed their water recyclers for free when they were stranded. Each memory, each moment of human decency came flooding back. Even species that had been rivals or had disliked humans for being too emotional or too aggressive found themselves reconsidering. A reptilian race called the Scar, who had frequently clashed with human diplomats over territory disputes, arrived with their fleet. Their commander transmitted tersely, "We argued about planets. They fight for lives. We understand the difference now." On the Indomitable, Admiral Okonkwo tried to process the flood of ships arriving. Her tactical officer was coordinating with dozens of fleet commanders, organizing the massive armada into something resembling a unified force. "Admiral," her communications officer said softly, "you need to say something. They are all waiting for your orders." Okonkwo had led fleets before, but never anything like this. 47 different species, thousands of ships, millions of beings who had come because humanity had shown them what courage meant. She opened a fleet-wide channel that would reach every single ship in the Viridian line. "This is Admiral Sarah Okonkwo to all coalition forces. I do not have words for what I feel right now. Humanity came here to pay a debt. We expected to die doing it. We made peace with that. But you came anyway. You proved that the galaxy is better than we feared. You proved that civilization means something. She paused, gathering her thoughts. The swarm is coming. A force twice the size of what we barely survived. But we are not alone anymore. I have fought my entire career with human crews. I have trained for human tactics. Now I must learn from all of you, even as you learn from us. She looked at her tactical display at the incredible variety of ships from dozens of species. Here is what humanity learned in 40 hours of fighting. The swarm expects rational behavior. They expect us to preserve our forces, to retreat when damaged, to value our lives above victory. We must show them something they have never encountered. Unity that makes no logical sense. Courage that ignores survival. Species that will die for each other because that is what civilization means. Her voice grew harder. Humans have a saying, no one fights harder than someone protecting their family. Well, today we are all family. Every species here. The swarm wants to consume us one at a time. Instead, they face us together. Let us teach them what happens when the galaxy finally decides to fight back. A roar of approval came back through the channels. Thane warriors beat their chests. Velusians pulsed with brilliant light. Species made sounds of approval in hundreds of different ways, but the meaning was universal. On his ancient warship, Elder Krith felt something he had not experienced in millennia: hope. His species had been dying slowly for so long. He had accepted that the Chromath would fade into history. But watching humanity's sacrifice, watching the galaxy unite, he suddenly understood that the Chromath's legacy would live on. Not in their own children, but in the lesson they had taught humanity 8 centuries ago, a lesson that had rippled across the galaxy. A young Thane warrior on Vorn's ship approached his captain. "Sir, why do we go? The humans have shown they will fight without us." Vorn looked at the young warrior with the patience of an elder teaching a child. "That is exactly why we go. Humanity fought when no victory was possible. They did not ask for help. They did not demand we join them. They simply stood in the darkness and said no further. We go now because victory is possible. Because together we have a chance." He put a massive hand on the warrior's shoulder. "That is the difference between honor lost and honor claimed, young one. The humans gave us a chance to reclaim ours." The sensor alarms began wailing across every ship. The second swarm fleet had arrived. Billions more bioships emerging from dark space like a plague. They filled the void, blotting out the stars. On the indomitable Admiral Okonkwo watched them come. Next to her, the holographic displays showed the Coalition Armada, species who had arrived to stand with humanity. She opened the fleet channel one more time. "All ships, this is the Admiral. Remember why we fight. Remember who we protect. Today, the galaxy learns that some things are worth any cost. Today, we teach the swarm that they face not prey, but predators." The Coalition Armada moved as one, thousands of ships advancing to meet the darkness. "For Earth," Okonkwo transmitted. "For the Chromath," Elder Krith added. "For the galaxy," General Thok finished, and the second battle began. The second battle for the Viridian Line would be remembered for 10,000 years. Historians of every species would mark it as the moment the galaxy changed forever. The swarm came like a living tsunami, billions of bioships coordinated by the hive mind. They had consumed countless civilizations over millions of years. They had never been truly defeated. But they had never faced a united galaxy before. The Coalition Armada met them head-on. Thane battlecruisers opened fire with weapons that turned space white with energy. Velusian science vessels deployed gravity wells that crushed swarm ships like insects. Species that had been exploring space for millennia unleashed technologies that had been gathering dust in museums, ancient weapons from forgotten wars, and humanity taught them how to fight with spite. On the indomitable, Admiral Okonkwo coordinated the massive fleet with a clarity born of desperation. But she was not fighting alone anymore. General Thok commanded the Thane war clans with brutal efficiency. The Velusian fleet master used her species' understanding of physics to predict swarm movements. Dozens of commanders shared information in real time, adapting and learning from each other. Human Tactic Alpha 7 is working for the Thane forces, her tactical officer reported. They are requesting more detailed instructions. Okonkwo opened a direct channel to General Thok. "General, the key is to make damaged ships into weapons. Your culture values honor and death, yes?" Thok's massive face showed what might have been a smile. "Indeed, Admiral. A Thane warrior who dies in battle is celebrated. What you ask is not sacrifice, it is glory. Then let us share glory, Okonkwo replied. The Thane embraced the human doctrine with enthusiasm. When their ships took critical damage, they did not retreat. They accelerated into swarm formations and triggered reactor overloads. But they added their own variation. Thane warriors broadcasted their death songs as they rammed swarm bioships. Ancient war chants that echoed across every coalition channel. The Velusians adapted differently. Their science vessels could not ram effectively, but they could manipulate gravity. Damaged Velusian ships positioned themselves in swarm formations and created singularities. Tiny black holes that lasted just seconds but consumed everything nearby. They called it the final equation, and they sung their own songs. Mathematical harmonies that sounded like music. Humanity had given the galaxy a template. Fight harder when losing. Turn every death into a weapon, and never let the enemy predict your actions. Each species adapted it to their strengths. The result was chaos for the swarm's hive mind. On the human destroyer Vengeance, Captain Liu noticed something critical. She had been monitoring the swarm's coordination patterns for hours, watching how the bioships communicated. Her science officer, a young woman named Chen, no relation to the ambassador, had been running analysis on the hive mind signals. Captain, Chen said excitedly, I found something. The swarm coordinates through a frequency pattern. It is how the hive mind controls billions of ships simultaneously, and I think we can jam it. Liu felt her heart race. Explain. If we generate a massive energy burst at the exact counter frequency, we can disrupt their coordination. But it would require, Chen's voice faltered, it would require a ship to detonate its reactor core at point-blank range to their command nodes. The energy signature would need to be perfectly timed. How do we identify command nodes? I can do that from here. But Captain, the ship that does this, there is no coming back from it. The reactor overload would need to be sustained for 12 seconds. Any crew would have to stay on board during the detonation. Liu understood immediately. This was not a ramming attack where death came instantly. This was choosing to stay on a ship as its reactor melted down, knowing every second was agony, but that those seconds might end the war. She opened a channel to the Indomitable. Admiral Okonkwo, this is Captain Liu. We have found a potential way to disrupt the swarm's hive coordination, but it requires a sacrifice. Okonkwo listened to the plan, her face growing pale. Captain, what you are describing is torture followed by death. I cannot order anyone to do that. You do not have to, Admiral. I volunteer. My ship is already damaged. My crew. Liu looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. My crew has already voted. We do this together. Around the bridge of the Vengeance, 32 crew members stood at attention. They had heard the plan. They knew what it meant, and every single one had chosen to stay. The Chromath saved billions when they diverted that solar flare, Liu said softly. 15,000 of them died doing it. My crew is 32 people, Admiral. If our 32 deaths save billions more, it is a trade I make gladly. Okonkwo closed her eyes. Command meant making impossible decisions. She had sent thousands to their deaths already in this battle. But those deaths had been quick, painless compared to what Liu was proposing. Captain Liu, she said finally, if you do this, humanity will remember your names forever. Your families will know you died saving the galaxy. We know, Admiral. Transmit the target coordinates. We are ready. The Vengeance broke formation and accelerated toward the swarm's center. Lieutenant Chen transmitted the frequency data to every coalition ship. All forces, when the Vengeance begins its detonation sequence, target these coordinates. The swarm's coordination will collapse for approximately 40 seconds. Make them count. The destroyer dove into the thickest part of the swarm fleet. Bioships swarmed around it like antibodies attacking a virus. The Vengeance took hit after hit, hull breaching, systems failing. But Captain Liu kept the ship on course, piloting manually when the computer failed. Reactor overload in 3, 2, 1. Beginning sustained detonation, the engineer reported. His voice steady despite the alarms screaming through the ship. The reactor began to melt down in a controlled fashion, pouring out energy in a specific frequency pattern. On the bridge, the temperature soared. Radiation warnings flashed red. The crew held their positions even as their instruments showed lethal levels of exposure. Captain Liu opened a final transmission. This is Captain Liu of the destroyer Vengeance. To Ambassador Chen Wei, tell my mother I remembered. To Elder Krith, we hope this repays some of what your people gave us. To anyone listening, it has been an honor to serve with you all. The transmission cut off, but the Vengeance continued broadcasting its disruptive signal. 12 seconds that felt like eternity. 12 seconds while 32 humans slowly died in the heart of a reactor meltdown, choosing to endure it so billions could live. When the reactor finally exploded, the energy pulse washed across the swarm fleet like a tidal wave. And suddenly, the hive mind went silent. Billions of swarm bioships lost coordination simultaneously. They stopped moving in perfect formation. They began making mistakes, colliding with each other, breaking attack patterns. For 40 seconds, the Void Swarm was just billions of individual ships with no controlling intelligence. "All forces fire at will," Admiral Okonkwo transmitted. "Make the Vengeance's sacrifice count." The Coalition Armada unleashed everything they had. Thane battlecruisers fired broadsides that cut through swarm formations like scythes. Velusian gravity weapons crushed hundreds of bioships at once. Human carriers launched every fighter craft they had remaining. Species that had never fought together before moved like a single organism, exploiting the 40 seconds of chaos. The swarm lost 20% of its fleet in those 40 seconds. But more importantly, when the hive mind reconnected, it was different. The coordination was damaged. The perfect unity was gone. The swarm had never experienced injury to its collective consciousness before. It did not know how to adapt. General Thok saw the opening. "All Thane forces advance. They are wounded. We finish this." The battle became a slaughter, but this time it was the swarm being slaughtered. Coalition forces pressed forward, exploiting every hesitation, every moment of confusion in the swarm's damaged coordination. Hours became days. The fighting continued without pause for 72 hours. On the Indomitable, Admiral Okonkwo had not slept since the battle began. Her uniform was stained with sweat and grime. Her voice was hoarse from giving orders. Around her, the bridge crew looked like ghosts, but they kept working. They kept fighting. "Admiral," her sensor operator said weakly, "the swarm is retreating. They are jumping back to dark space." The bridge went silent. Nobody moved. Nobody believed it. "Confirm that reading," Okonkwo ordered. "Confirmed, Admiral. The swarm remnants are in full retreat. They are fleeing the Viridian Line." Across the Coalition fleet, the news spread like wildfire. Species that had fought for 3 days straight without rest suddenly found strength to cheer. Thane warriors roared their victory songs. Velusians pulsed with brilliant light. Humans simply collapsed at their stations, too exhausted to celebrate. But the cost was terrible. The human fleet was reduced to 23% of its original strength. 4 million human souls had died in the Viridian Line. The Vengeance and its crew of 32 were gone. Dozens of other species had also paid heavily. The Thane had lost thousands, the Velusians hundreds, but the Viridian Line held. The swarm was broken, and the galaxy was saved. Elder Krith sat on his ship's bridge, all 4 arms shaking. He was ancient, and he had seen much in his long life. But he had never seen anything like this. A young species had volunteered for extinction to save his people. And in doing so, they had united the galaxy and defeated an enemy thought invincible. 10 years passed. The galaxy rebuilt. The Viridian Line became a memorial system, with stations dedicated to remembering those who had died. Every species contributed. The largest monument was simple, a wall with 4 million human names carved into eternal stone, and in the center, 32 names larger than the rest, the crew of the Vengeance. But there was another monument too on the Chromath homeworld, a massive sculpture showing a human hand and a Chromath hand clasped in friendship. The inscription read, "They remembered. So shall we." Humanity became something different in those years. Other species no longer saw them as young or unremarkable. They saw them as the species that had taught the galaxy what civilization truly meant. Human military doctrine was studied in every academy. The human doctrine of fighting harder when losing, of turning sacrifice into strategy, became standard teaching, but humanity also changed how they saw themselves. They had proven that 800 years of civilization built on a single act of kindness could change the galaxy. They had proven that remembering good deeds and repaying them mattered more than survival. Ambassador Chen Wei, now elderly, sat in a memorial station in the Viridian Line. Across from her sat Elder Krith, even more ancient than before. Between them was a bottle of Chromath ceremonial wine, 1,000 years old, saved for moments that shaped history. "Was it worth it?" Chen asked softly. Krith poured 2 glasses with trembling hands. Every species you saved will ask their descendants that question. But you humans? You never asked. You simply did it, Chen smiled. We learned from the Chromath. 8 centuries ago you saved us without asking if it was worth it. And now, Krith said, raising his glass, we are friends. Now we are friends, Chen agreed. They drank together as children of 100 species played in the memorial gardens outside. The children laughed and ran, innocent of the cost paid for their lives. All except one small human girl who stopped by the memorial wall. She placed a flower at the base where Captain Lu's name was carved, and whispered, "We remember." Those 2 words echoed across the galaxy, a promise and a legacy, the foundation of a civilization that had proven some debts can never be repaid, only honored, remembered, and passed forward to each new generation that would carry the torch of what it means to be truly human.